Carolyn Jones, the woman behind the dark icon. Carolyn Jones became Hollywood's most famous dark icon, but her real life was darker than anything she ever played on screen. As a child, she was too sick to leave her bed. Her mother refused to leave the house for years. Her father vanished when she was only 4. Then at 22, she filmed her first major role as a corpse covered in wax. A cast was made of her real body for the movie, and that was just the beginning. There were secret marriages, a book she later tried to bury, and a final year so painful that her ex-husband quietly sent champagne to her door every single day. Carolyn Sue Jones was born on April 28, 1930, in Amarillo, Texas. From a very start, her life felt a little removed from the world around her. Her mother, Chloe Jeanette Southern, was a housewife. Her father, Julius Alfred Jones, was a local barber. She also had a younger sister named Betria. On paper, it looked like an ordinary family. In reality, it was anything but. Carolyn was imaginative, unusual, and a little mysterious even as a child. She and her mother even shared the same birthday. And according to Betria, they also shared something else, a very uncommon temperament. Chloe was agoraphobic. Leaving the house was difficult for her, and for long stretches of time, she did not leave at all. So Carolyn grew up in a home that already felt closed off from the rest of the world. Then things got even harder. In 1934, when Carolyn was only 4 years old, her father left the family. Some people said he had lost his barber job during the Great Depression. Others said he simply walked away. What stayed the same in every version was the result. He was gone, and Carolyn later said she never saw him again. After that, her mother took Carolyn and Betria to live with Chloe's adoptive parents, the Bakers, still in Amarillo. From then on, Charles W. Baker, her grandfather, became the closest thing Carolyn had to a father figure. That alone would have changed any child. But Carolyn's life did not stop there. She developed severe asthma, and the attacks came so often and so violently that she could not attend regular school. Years later, in a 1961 interview, she described it very plainly. As a child, her health kept her from going to school. She was too sick to play, so tutors educated her at home. Her life became mental instead of physical. That one detail explains almost everything that came later. While other children ran outside, Carolyn stayed in bed. While other girls went places, she lived mostly inside her own head. Even movie theaters, which she loved from a distance, were usually out of reach because smoke and dust could trigger her asthma. So she found another way in. She read fan magazines. She memorized film credits. She imagined the sets, the costumes, the lights, and the people. She listened to Danny Kaye and Spike Jones on the radio and made them her early idols. Even before Hollywood knew her name, she was already building a world inside herself. That world kept growing. While still in high school, she worked briefly as a disc jockey at a local Amarillo radio station. By then, her deep alto voice was already fully formed. Rich? Strange and impossible to mistake. It would stay that way for the rest of her life. This is what made her story different from a usual Hollywood origin. Many actresses found acting through school productions, dance lessons, or eager mothers pushing them toward a stage. Carolyn came to it from isolation. Acting was not just a dream for her. It was a way out. It was the one thing that made life feel bigger than the bedroom where illness had trapped her for so long. So when 1947 came, she made her move. At 17, Carolyn convinced her grandfather to pay for her enrollment at the Pasadena Playhouse in California. Some records suggest she was underage for admission and may have lied about her age on the paperwork. The exact details shift depending on the source, but the heart of the story does not. Carolyn was determined to leave Texas, and if that meant changing a detail on a form, she did it. She graduated from the Playhouse in 1950, picked up summer stock work to earn extra money, and according to later accounts, the only non-entertainment job she ever held was a short 2-week position at a stationery company back in Amarillo before leaving for California. Once she stepped into that new world, there was no real going back. Then she made another bold decision. Before Hollywood signed her, she changed her face. In 1950, still only 19 or 20, She had cosmetic nose surgery to make herself more photogenic on screen. At the time, it was painful and still fairly unusual. Then she dyed her naturally strawberry blonde hair platinum. She explained the choice very clearly in a 1953 interview. Once she became a definite blonde, she was signed by Paramount. She believed blonde hair got attention. And attention built confidence. And confidence started a chain reaction. It sounds blunt, but she was right. Within weeks, Paramount gave her a contract. It did not last long. The deal ran for 6 months. And when it ended in 1952, she was released during a period when the old studio system was already starting to crack under the pressure of television. Carolyn described it with a dark humor that became one of her trademarks. She said they let her and 16 secretaries go. It was funny, but it also said a lot. Hollywood could open a door very quickly and shut it just as fast. Then came the part that first put her in front of a national audience, and it was about as strange and eerie as a first role could be. In 1953, at age 22, Carolyn appeared in House of Wax as Kathy Gray. The film opened in New York on April 10th and went into general release on April 25th. It was a major technical event as well. The first color 3D feature from a major American studio, and the first 3D film with stereophonic sound shown in a regular theater. But for Carolyn, the role itself was unforgettable for another reason entirely. Vincent Price played a wax sculptor named Professor Henry Jared, whose museum burns down after his greedy partner betrays him. Jared survives, but he is disfigured, crippled, and no longer able to sculpt with his damaged hands. He opens a new wax museum, but the figures are not wax at all. They are real dead bodies coated in wax. Carolyn's character, Kathy Gray, is the fiancée of the corrupt partner. Jared murders her off-screen, steals her body from a morgue, and turns her into the museum's Joan of Arc exhibit. It was her first credited film role. That means the first real image many American moviegoers had of Carolyn Jones was as a murdered woman transformed into a display piece. A cast of her body was even made for production, partly in plaster and partly in wax, so the figure could appear in the film. Critics at the time sometimes referred to her by the character's name because the face was new and the image was so striking. Just before that film, she had almost landed an even bigger role. Columbia tested her for the part of Alma Burke in From Here to Eternity, but during the test period, she came down with pneumonia and could not continue. The role went to Donna Reed, who was 9 years older and later won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. Carolyn's own Oscar nomination would come only a few years later, and for a role much smaller than most people would expect. In 1957, she appeared in The Bachelor Party, a drama about 5 New York office workers whose evening spirals into something darker and more revealing. Carolyn played a character known only as the existentialist, a cynical, sharp bohemian who drifts into the party and leaves a mark far larger than her screen time would suggest. At one point, she delivers a line that became one of the most quoted of her career. "Just say you love me. You don't have to mean it." She was only on screen for about 5 to 8 minutes, depending on how it is counted. Still, those minutes were enough to earn her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. She lost at the 30th Academy Awards on March 26, 1958, to Miyoshi Yumiki for Sayonara. Even so, she did not walk away empty-handed. She won the Laurel Award for Top Supporting Female Performance, and she also won the Golden Globe for New Star of the Year for her role in Marjorie Morningstar, which came out in 1958. To play the existentialist, she transformed herself again. She cut her long blonde hair short and dyed it jet black. That change stayed. Aside from brief returns to lighter shades, black became her signature for the rest of her life. Long before Morticia Addams made it famous, Carolyn had already turned that dark look into her own symbol, and the move was calculated. Years earlier, she had explained that standing out in Hollywood required becoming visually definite. This time, the dark hair did exactly that. What followed proved how much range she had, even when she was not always the main star. 5 films featuring Carolyn Jones were later added to the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as culturally or historically significant. The War of the Worlds, House of Wax, The Big Heat, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and How the West Was Won. Most actors never appear in one such film. Carolyn was in 5 within about a decade. By the time the bachelor party came along, her personal life had already moved almost as quickly as her career. She had been married twice. Her first marriage to fellow Pasadena Playhouse student Don Donaldson ended so quickly that many biographies barely pause on it. The second mattered much more, both personally and historically. That was her marriage to Aaron Spelling. At the time, Spelling was a struggling actor and writer from Dallas. He was talented but broke, unsure of himself, and in no position to make big promises. So Carolyn solved the problem herself. She proposed to him. They married on April 5, 1953, in Los Angeles, when she was 22 and he was 30. She converted to Judaism for the wedding. Then, for most of the marriage, she became the breadwinner. According to Spelling's later interviews, Carolyn accepted acting jobs she did not even respect, so he could stay home and write scripts. He never forgot it. In one interview, he said exactly that. In another from 1960, he called her the only person in the world he needed. He said they were more than in love. He said they were best friends. But time changed that picture. They separated in October 1963 and divorced amicably on August 6, 1964. Carolyn asked for no alimony. They divided $400,000 in community property, and Aaron gave her the house in the settlement. Even after the divorce, they reportedly continued seeing each other for a while and remained close friends until her death. What makes that marriage especially revealing is not how it ended, but what Carolyn understood about herself while she was in it. According to several biographies, she chose not to have children because she believed she could not balance both a demanding career and a family. It was a hard truth, especially for a woman in that era, but she knew herself well enough to say it clearly. She did not believe she could have both, so she chose the work. Then came the role that would make her unforgettable. The Addams Family premiered on ABC on September 18, 1964, just 6 weeks after her divorce from Aaron Spelling became final. The series was based on Charles Addams's dark, elegant cartoons from The New Yorker. Before the television show, the characters did not even have the names by which they would become famous. It was for the show that names like Morticia, Gomez, Wednesday, Pugsley, Uncle Fester, Grandmama, Lurch, and Thing entered American culture. Charles Addams himself chose Carolyn Jones to play Morticia. That detail matters because she was not simply cast by a producer who wanted a pretty actress in black. She was selected by the man who had created the whole strange world. Carolyn had loved his cartoons for years, and the two became close friends. Her costume was built to match the exact proportions of Addams's drawings: a full black gown, a trumpet train, long pointed sleeves, and a deep neckline. It was not just a costume. It was a translation of a drawing into a living person. Carolyn wore it so perfectly that in her will, she donated both the costume and the black wig to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, where they remain in the Academy's permanent collection to this day. There is another twist in this story that almost sounds invented. Aaron Spelling, now her ex-husband, was the one who convinced her to take the role. Only 6 weeks after the divorce, he was still advising her career, and she still trusted his instincts. This time, he was right. She said yes, and that decision fixed her place in television history. Still, even Morticia had a cost. Carolyn had one major complaint from the beginning. The wig was awful. It was tight, hot, and almost impossible to wear comfortably through long filming days. Some sources described the headaches as nearly constant. She had actually been growing out her own natural hair and hoped to use it on the show eventually. In a 1964 interview, she said she thought she would be able to stop wearing the wig within 5 years. But the series only lasted 2 seasons and 64 episodes, ending on April 8, 1966. So that plan never became real. Most viewers remember her only as Morticia and stopped there. But Carolyn also played Morticia's identical twin sister, Ophelia Frump, bright, giggling, blonde, and completely unlike Morticia in mood, style, and energy. In those episodes, she wore a blonde wig and floral clothes and changed her entire performance. She even voiced a female version of Thing, called Lady Fingers, in another recurring bit. After the Addams Family ended in 1966, Carolyn Jones did not just leave behind a popular TV role. She left behind an image that kept living on. The shape of Morticia, the long black dress, the long black hair, the quiet grace, stayed in American pop culture long after the show was gone. That look became a kind of blueprint, showing up again and again. One of its most famous later forms was Elvira. Before Morticia, there was Vampira, played by Mila Nurmi, who came first. But over time, Vampira and Morticia started blending together in the public imagination. Then in 1981, when KHJTV in Los Angeles wanted to bring back its local horror host show, the role eventually went to Cassandra Peterson, who created Elvira. Peterson later said the producers wanted someone vampy, dressed all in black, almost like a playful spin on Morticia Addams. She and makeup artist Robert A. Redding built the look from there. The high black wig, the low-cut black gown, the gothic eye makeup. Even as recently as 2025, Peterson explained it simply. They had their limits, black hair, black dress, and some 1980s jewelry. So even if Elvira became her own icon, the path to her runs straight through Carolyn Jones. Right in the middle of that cultural chain, Vampire in 1954, Morticia in 1964, Elvira in 1981, stands Carolyn Jones. Without her, Elvira almost certainly does not exist in the form people know today. And yet, even with that kind of cultural impact, Jones paid a price for playing Morticia so well. Once the Addams Family was over, Hollywood struggled to see anything else when they looked at her. Her film career slowed down. She was typecast. Instead of big new screen roles, she mostly appeared in television guest spots: Batman, The Mod Squad, Ironside, The Virginian, Fantasy Island, The Love Boat, and more. Many of these projects were connected to Aaron Spelling, or his company in one way or another. By that point, her ex-husband had become one of television's most powerful producers, and he kept finding ways to give her work. Their marriage ended, but some bond clearly remained. One of the most memorable guest roles came almost immediately after the Addams Family. She appeared in 5 episodes of the Adam West Batman series as Marcia, Queen of Diamonds. Her first episode aired on ABC on November 23rd, 1966. The role had first been meant for Zsa Zsa Gabor, but Jones ended up being a perfect fit. She played a glamorous villain with exactly the right mix of danger and fun, dressed in black velvet, wearing a diamond tiara, using the same rich, lowered voice that had made Morticia unforgettable. Then there's the part of her story that surprises almost everyone the first time they hear it. Carolyn Jones wrote a sex novel. In 1971, Simon & Schuster published her hardcover book, Twice Upon a Time. It was not some quiet side project. It was a thinly disguised story about Hollywood and Broadway, set in the middle of the sexual revolution, key parties, spouse swapping, and the restless energy of the late 1960s and early 1970s. Readers long believed the characters were barely hidden versions of real people from her own life. Some of the scenes were highly sexual, and the writing was blunt even by modern standards. Jones herself did not pretend otherwise. In fact, she gave the book its most famous review in one brutal sentence. She said she wrote a sex book, that it was not particularly well written, and that she was not proud of it. That honesty makes the whole thing even more striking. Publicly, she was Morticia, a woman defined by dark charm, restraint, and a strangely old-fashioned devotion to marriage. But then there was this second self, sitting on bookstore shelves in plain sight. By the late 1960s, her life changed again. In 1968, 1 year before Aaron Spelling married Candy, Carolyn married her vocal coach, Herbert Green, a Tony Award-winning Broadway musical director and vocal arranger who had worked with her during the short period when she tried to build a singing career. This marriage pulled her away from Hollywood. She and Green moved to Palm Springs, California, and spent about 7 years there in something close to semi-retirement. Even then, Jones described her surroundings in a line, so sharp it stayed with people for years. She called Palm Springs God's waiting room. It was such a bleak and funny line that it could only have come from someone who saw life very clearly. She eventually left Green on April 5, 1977, which was also the 24th anniversary of her marriage to Spelling. Then she returned to Los Angeles and began trying to rebuild a career that had drifted off course. Then came the final chapter, and it was as painful as it was brave. Carolyn Jones was diagnosed with colon cancer in 1981. She was just 51 years old, but she did not stop working. That same year, she accepted the role of Myrna Clegg, the scheming and wealthy matriarch of the Clegg family, in a new CBS daytime soap opera called Capital. The show premiered on March 26, 1982. Before it launched, she described her character with the biting humor she was known for. Myrna, she said, was a ruthless, filthy rich old broad with a sunken red bathtub for two. The role gave her a chance to work, and she held on to it with incredible strength. During the show's first production year, the cancer spread to her liver and stomach. Chemotherapy slowed it down but could not stop it. People on the set later said Jones kept acting even while using a wheelchair and living with serious pain. Her lines were often rewritten in the morning to fit what she could physically manage that day. Her co-star Jane Daly later said Jones had decided she would keep playing Myrna Clegg until she literally could not get the words out anymore. She called her absolutely indomitable. There is also a detail repeated for years in fan accounts, that in her final months, she could no longer keep down solid food, and the only thing she could tolerate was champagne. Aaron Spelling, according to those stories, sent a case of the best he could buy to her house every day. Even while dying, she kept making choices for herself. On September 25, 1982, knowing the end was near, Carolyn Jones married actor Peter Bailey Britton, the man she had been with for 5 years. It was her fourth marriage. She was 52. He became her final husband. Her last filmed episodes of Capital aired in March 1983. About 2 months before she died, she was released from the hospital and taken home for care. Then in July 1983, she fell into a coma at her home in West Hollywood. She never woke up. On August 3, 1983, at 11:45 in the morning Pacific Daylight Time, Carolyn Jones died. She was 53 years old. What happened after her death feels sad, but also strangely fitting. Her body was cremated on August 4th. A memorial service was held the next day. Her ashes were placed in her mother Chloe's crypt at Melrose Abbey Memorial Park and Mortuary in Anaheim. Her Morticia costume and black wig were given to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Her collection of Addams Family scripts was later donated by Peter Bailey Britton to UCLA, where they still remain in the university archive. Even in death, pieces of her life were carefully placed where people could remember what she had given. And maybe the most touching detail of all is the one she chose herself. She had already told her sister Betria what she wanted written on her epitaph. For simple words, she gave joy to the world. That was how she wanted to be remembered. When Bob Hope heard the news of her death, he said the world had lost a fine actress whose impeccable timing made her equally at home in drama and comedy. And then he added something even more important. The world had lost not just a great talent, but a marvelous human being.